Hey, what's up? What's up? It's your girl Erica, and thanks for tuning into my YouTube channel. Welcome, 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 and happy Sunday. I hope you're having an amazing day thus far, and I hope your week has gotten off to a great start. I am here to do my weekly review or recap of Love and Marriage Huntsville. This is season 10. This was episode 5, and it's called Nell to the No. Now, let me just say this before we get started. I can say that this season has actually been pretty good. Last season, around this time, we were kind of struggling because, of course, Mel and Martell just weren't getting along, and Mel wasn't really getting along with too many people in the group. So it made it a little more difficult to actually watch the show because there was so much tension. And although there are still some issues that need to be addressed and need to be worked out, I think this group is actually trying, and it is sort of meshing and coming together. So let's get started. As you can see, guys, I have quite a few notes today, and I'm going to refer back to my notes quite a bit because I don't want to forget anything. There was a lot of conversations. Like I said, I do kind of remember what happened just off the top of my head, but just the conversations, I don't want to leave anything out because I think last week I left out a couple of things that I should have actually added, and I don't want to do that this week. So let's get started. So the opening scene was, of course, with Nell and her son Lance. Nell goes to visit her son Lance at his particular his townhouse or his house or apartment or whatever it is. She went to visit to Lance's home, and they were just talking. Of course, Nell bought some treats and stuff for them to eat, and she was, they was just sort of having the normal mom and son talk, like, hey, when I come over, you never have anything cooked for me, or you never have anything for me to eat. And they were kind of joking back and forth about that. But the situation, or I would say their conversation, sort of turned serious. Lance was just basically telling his mom how it is being a single dad. Lance has a newborn baby girl. At this particular time, I know that he has two other children. I don't know where the mother of the child is, but he's making it seem, or he's telling his mom as if he is a single dad and he's actually taking care of the baby all on his own. He was talking about the baby's feeding schedule and her sleeping schedule and all of those things. He says it's actually breaking him down because he is the type of guy, I think he owns his own business, and he's saying, like, having to deal with a newborn and then having to wake up early and go to work and sort of be present at work. And I think, whatever he does, I think it's some type of home improvements business. So whatever he does, it may be a little physical work involved as well. So he's seemingly a little tired. Nell offered her own services. He didn't say anything to her. Nell said, hey, would it help if I came over like 2 to 3 times a week? Lance said that would be great, but Lance said, I do know you would have to talk to Dad about it. And so she said she was like, well, look, we've been through our own stuff. Like, Chris, basically, Nell was sort of saying, like, Chris should be able to do without me or function on his own for, like, 2 to 3 days. We've been through our own stuff and we've overcome that, so this would be no different. So Lance said, well, hey, give it a go and basically talk to, your husband about it. And that was just the gist of that. They also talked about Destiny. And I'm glad because I want to see a conversation between Lance and Destiny. We already know Destiny, like I said, hasn't been on the show that much this season as of yet. I'm not saying that she won't be, incorporated a lot more into their scenes and to their, social functions and stuff like that. But right now, we have not seen a whole lot of Destiny. So I do want Lance and Destiny to have a conversation. So Lance did say that he doesn't owe Destiny an explanation for why he was basically dealing with someone else, but he does owe her a conversation. Now, both Destiny and Lance have said that, hey, it was just like a little, they were like, friends with benefits. It was that type thing. Or, they were just cool. It was like an open thing where they could see other people and they had that understanding. So Lance is saying that Destiny really should not be upset about what happened between them because, hey, they weren't really serious. Now, we know as women, oftentimes women say that we try to play that thing like, hey, it's cool or whatever the case may be. I'm speaking for a woman. I can't speak for a man, but I know sometimes as women, we say, oh, okay, it's cool, you know, it's nothing serious. Yeah, we can see other people, but deep down inside, you know, we don't want to make it seem like we're so much into the guy right away, or we're not trying to put sort of like tabs on him or put a label on anything. But in actuality, women, you know, most of the times women do want something a little more serious. I know Destiny has come off of a divorce, and she had her own issues with her baby daddy. So yeah, maybe Destiny is at that place where she doesn't want to be in a fully committed relationship, but at the same time, Destiny still wants some type of loyalty, which makes me say, okay, Destiny, you want a little more, because you can't have it both ways. You can't have like this friends with benefits and stuff like that, but then still want their loyalty. So I really just believe that Destiny is just afraid of getting hurt again, and she really didn't know where things would sort of land with her and Lance. But anyway, I'm looking forward to that conversation because I'm tired of everyone else talking about it. I want to see where they kind of like, you know, with the meeting of the minds with them. So, you know, we move on and we see Kimmy, Tisha, and Destiny meet up, and that was the end of their conversation. So, like I said, because Nell is also like, Nell is kind of like a hoverer over her children too, and I know that Nell has her own opinion, and even in the previews for next week, Nell said something that kind of bugged me a little bit, but we'll get to that. And the reason why I went back to that, because I was getting ready to go to another scene, but I just wanted to say too that Nell is like she hovers over her children. You can tell she's a very protective mom, which is nothing wrong with that, but I can see that Nell definitely also is one of those moms who's like really in her children's business. So if Lance is having problems with his baby mama, she's definitely going to take Lance's side, even with this whole Destiny thing. You know, Nell would not have wanted that the same thing to have happened to any of her children, where her children were blindsided by someone they were actually seeing or whatever, to sort of not tell them the truth. But again, like I said, Nell is, you know, that type of mom where whatever, you know, that's my child, and you know, whatever my child wants, my child gets. However my child feels, I'm going to support them 100%. But anyway, Kimmy, Tisha, and Destiny, they go to a little, it's like a little, like a clothing boutique in Huntsville. I didn't really see a whole lot of clothes. They really didn't pick out anything, so I can't say whether, oh, you know, I saw a lot of things that I liked or whatever. They were just kind of talking. Latisha and Kimmy came. They initially got there first, and they were having their little conversations. And so Destiny shows up. Like I said, all the ladies, they look really nice. I like Latisha with the glasses. I think, first of all, I think Latisha has a natural beauty, but she looks really good with the glasses. Kimmy looks beautiful. This is a woman who fought cancer and beat the battle. She looks extremely well. Like, Kimmy looks so pretty. And then also even Destiny had her hair braided, but Destiny, her face card is just, Destiny's just a pretty girl. So, you know, these ladies, they look really nice, although they weren't like super dolled up, but they look nice just coming to the store. So they were, of course, talking, and, you know, they were saying they hadn't seen Destiny in a while, and Destiny was actually saying, you know, she was working. She said she had like something like a live on TikTok, so that's why she had not been around. So Destiny, you know, in her confessional said, hey, I'm a single mom, you know, it's better for me to make the money rather than to hang out with these girls. And I think that they were okay with that. Kimmy also brought up to Destiny how, you know, Kimmy was just telling Destiny what Nell was saying, how the girls are not transparent and they need to get to know each other and this, that, and the other. So, you know, Destiny has her own feelings about that, but, you know, Kimmy also brought up the fact that, you know, she wants the ladies to talk about the interview with Martell and the actual, or Marceau's mistress or whatever. So they were talking about that. Destiny, you know, they have their own feelings about it, and Destiny actually respected how they felt. But Destiny is also friends with Martell, and Destiny even said, like, even some of the things that I think Tisha was the one who said we should leave children and, you know, spouses out of it. And Destiny said, yeah, I said that same thing to Martell. And, you know, Tisha kind of walked away, and Kimmy was like, girl. So Destiny was like, okay, am I going to get that energy every time his name is mentioned? And Kim was like, pretty much. And I get it, but I don't get it, because let's be clear. Destiny has always been pretty close with Martell, even when, but she was also friends with Mel. And then I can say the same for all of them. Like Latisha and Marceau were very close to Martell even after Melody and Martell split up. You know, Melody was telling us a lot of things that were going on with Martell. That didn't change how they treated Martell. That didn't change them being friendly with him or hanging out with him or whatever the case may be. The same with Maurice and Kimmy. Maurice and Kimmy never turned their back on Martell. In fact, they were very friendly with Martell. They spent a lot of time with Martell. All of these people have been friends with they've all been friends with Martell, even despite everything that's gone on with him and Mel. So I don't really understand why Tisha sort of took that attitude toward Destiny, because just last season, until they had that falling out last season, Tisha was also riding on, you know, the Martell train with Marceau as well. But it wasn't until he said something about her that she sort of changed her mind. Now, Tisha was never one to really say, I like, you know, I'm friends with Martell, I'm friends with Martell, I'm friends with Martell. But Tisha was also always very respectful of Martell. You know, she would say, you know, hey, Martell hasn't really done anything to me per se, and I'm not going to mistreat him, because at that particular time, her and Mel, you know, she was saying like, well, Martell is a little nicer to me than Mel is. So I think that's why Tisha kind of went, you know, that way. But like I said, I think that they all need to respect, or they all need to be honest and say, look, we all have loved Martell, you know, we've also hated Martell. You know, right now Destiny and Martell are cool, and they always have been. And I do believe Destiny when she says that she's not going back talking about the other people. She does try to give him advice and tell him to pull back or not say certain things or not do certain things, you know. And I do believe that about Destiny. A lot of times, you know, people say they don't like Destiny. I actually like Destiny. I feel like Destiny has the biggest heart in the world. She comes across as she can be, you know, rough and tough and all that stuff. She's very, you know, little brash. You know, she says she has big D energy, but I can see through that. I see that Destiny really has a big heart, and I think she's a loyal person. I think Destiny says she's your friend, that she's your friend, or, you know, you have a friendship with her, I do believe that she will be a good friend to you. And I do believe that she does tell Martell the truth. And I don't think that, because by now, the way Martell is rolling, if there was something with Destiny, Martell would just go ahead and say it at this point. I mean, he's getting away with, you know, he's gotten away with exposing Mel. Now he has exposed Marceau and Maurice, and you know that's what's happening. That's what's going on in Latisha, and that's what's going on in this friend group. So if Destiny was doing something, you know, sort of that was out of order or off the wall or maybe out of character, I think that Martell would actually expose her. So that's why I say I do believe that Destiny and Martell they do have a real friendship, and I do think that Martell respects Destiny just a little bit, not much, because we know how he feels about women, but I do think that he will acknowledge that Destiny has been there for him. Let's just say that. So they go on, they keep talking. They bring up the whole Lance thing. They talk about that conversation was mentioned and stuff like that. And of course, Destiny was a little like, she was a little opposed to it. She had her little, you know, facial expressions or whatever. And Kimmy was like, well, what's the big deal? Because you said that, you know, it was no big deal about you and Lance, and whatever the case may be, you were even looking at another guy. And Destiny told Kimmy straight up, she was like, look, you caused, even if there was an issue with Lance and I, she said, we were good before that. But when you said that I was flirting with this other guy and I was looking at this other guy at Nell and Chris's vow renewal, she said that kind of made things bad, you know, because I had to kind of explain myself, and it kind of, you know, made things bad between Lance and I. Now, I really believe that Lance knew this baby was on the way, so he was looking for a way out anyway. So anything that Destiny said or did, he was going to use it against her anyway. So Lance just used the fact that Destiny commented and said that another man was attractive and that it was brought up in front of the group. He just used that to kind of, you know, get away from Destiny in a way, or to kind of break things off, or to say, well, hey, you know, maybe, you know, you know, you looking at other men and all that. Excuse me, Lance, that's not an excuse. Not a valid reason, because I'm sure Lance looks at women every day, all day, even when he was with Destiny. But anyway, so Kimmy, she sort of shied away from it when Destiny told her it was her fault, and they kind of, ran the tape back. Now Kimmy is a person, sometimes she will kind of, I don't want to say Kimmy's the person that would throw the rock and hide her hand. She's not necessarily that, but Kimmy does say things in a way that doesn't seem problematic, but in actuality, Kimmy, you're being a little messy. And when that took place, even though Kimmy said it in such an innocent, unproblematic way, at the same time, Kimmy, you were still planting the seed as if Destiny was interested or really looking at and sort of zooming in on this other guy. And that's not what was going on. So they kind of had a good laugh about it. Like I said, it was a good little girl scene. It was a rather long scene, but it was just actually a good girl scene. They sort of, at the end, they laughed and kikied about it, and, they moved on. And that's what we like to see. Of course, you're going to agree to disagree, but of course, this should not be a conversation that needs to be had 2 and 3 episodes down the road. So the way that ended was good. So Nell and Latisha met up. Nell said she had a great time at Latisha's party. And, Latisha said she was glad that everyone had, a great time. She felt really, really good about that. She said that she was glad. She said she noticed that there was a little tension. Of course, she wanted to know, what really happened, what went down. Why do you think it went down the way it did between Latisha versus Nell and Chris. And Nell said she didn't like the fact that Latisha approached her husband. And I think any wife would feel that way. I thought Chris can handle his own. The reason why I'm not so angry with Latisha about this, because you could tell Latisha was drunk. When Latisha does that, like I said, she becomes like a little more vocal. She becomes a little more forceful and aggressive, not in a way to fight, but she's very much, she's, a lot more vocal, she's more in your face type. But I don't think that she would have really done anything to Chris. But of course, Nell, let me say this. Nell and Latisha are like oil and water. They have never gotten along from day one. Since this show started, they have never gotten along. Of course, we know that Nell was introduced through Mel and Martell. And no matter what, I don't even want to get into, well, Nell was on Mel's side or anything like that. They just have never gotten along. Like I said, they're like oil and water. Latisha and Nell really don't care for one another, and their personalities clash. And this is a clear example of it. They're just using this excuse to, sort of say, well, hey, she's disrespecting me or whatever, when in actuality, the two of these ladies really just don't care for one another. That's what it is to me. But Nell was just saying that, hey, that's my husband, and the way she approached him, it was wrong. So Latisha was trying to say, even in her confessional, Latisha said, okay, I can understand where Nell is coming from, but Latisha never comes across that way. And she was trying to let us know Latisha's not really a nasty, aggressive person. So I can't agree with Nell 100%. I can agree with the fact that maybe Latisha shouldn't have said something to Chris, but I can't agree that Latisha is like this super nasty, vicious person. And I'm glad that, Latisha just kind of gave Nell that pushback, because Nell, to me, is going a little hard with this situation. I really do. Like I said, to me, they keep talking about transparency. That's the buzzword, transparency. Well, in actuality, all of these women are sort of holding back in some sort of way, and they would rather for the spotlight to be on another person versus them. It's like, I don't want to talk about my stuff. We know that Latisha and Kimmy are going to deny any type of cheating allegations with their husbands. There, to me, Latisha and Kimmy have become worse than Marceau and Maurice. Marceau and Maurice are denying that they've ever had affairs, but I mean, Latisha and Kimmy are worse because they're getting into the details and the whole minutia of, well, I mean, there's no proof, and I mean, this person is that way. I mean, are they believable? What about their character? It's like they go into all of these details as to why their husbands are not cheating. Well, we don't have any proof. No one has come forth. And I mean, that type of woman, I mean, she's not even believable. So they're never going to admit to us or admit to the viewers that their husbands have cheated. They know deep down inside that their husbands have done something. It's called a woman's intuition. They may not let us know. They may not ever reveal it to us, but they know. But what I don't like is that they're trying to play this role like the whole Chrissy Snow thing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Chrissy Snow, but Chrissy Snow was like, she was on the show Three's Company, and she was like a dumb blonde. Like, that's where it sort of came from. And they're playing like this dumb blonde role. Like, I don't know, when it comes to their husbands. And I think that's really annoying in a way. But again, like Nell, you're just going to have to let it go, because even though you're trying to get answers out of them, the more you push them, the more you look like you sort of look kind of crazy and trying to push these women when for yourself, you've been seeing what they've been doing. They've been denying it ever since you met them. It's nothing new. Granted, the interview with Martell that he did was something a little newer because it happened right after, or it was like during the time, or in the time period of season 9 and season 10. But them denying the cheating allegations is nothing new now. And you're just going to have to let it go. It's kind of like, you have to almost like let it fall, like let it come out another way that you have nothing to do with. You know what I'm saying? At some point, trust and believe, something else will come up at another time. Something else or someone else will come forth and say, hey, they saw Marceau, they saw Maurice, and this is what happened. And you just have to kind of wait until that happens, because you pushing it and you going after them about it is like, it's starting to look like you're just being a real petty Betty at this point. So Jaylin goes to see his mom. And also, Latisha told them that the ladies need to get together. She actually said, everyone needs to get together. So we'll see how that goes. Jaylin went to see Kimmy at her office, and they were just talking. We saw that Jaylin said that he was going to Colorado for a job. He accepted a job there, but Jaylin came back this episode and said that he got a more lucrative offer from a company in Huntsville, and it's actually what he wants to do is right in line with his field of work or whatever, so he's going to accept that position. Kimmy was very happy because of course she doesn't want her son and her best friend to go away from her. Kimmy would really have to deal with Maurice all on her own, and I don't even think Kimmy wants to do that. And that's sad to say, but Kimmy really doesn't want to be with her husband by herself and not have Jaylin there. But she said that maybe her and Jaylin could do a project together without Maurice and Monster. And Jaylin did mention that he feels like he said he had the conversation with Maurice, but he doesn't feel like Maurice really got it. And that's sad to say. Jaylin feels like, I talked to Maurice, I expressed myself, I told him how I felt, yet I still feel like there's a block there, there's a wall there, he really didn't get it. And Jaylin is right. Maurice is not going to accept that he's done anything wrong. Martin Luther Maurice wants to preach at everyone else and tell everyone else what they need to do, yet he's not going to take accountability for anything that he's done. So Jaylin was 100% right. And of course, here we go again. Kimmy making excuses for Maurice. Well, that's just how Maurice is. I mean, he does the same thing with me. Marceau has even said that he does the same thing with him. Well, Kimmy, that doesn't make it right. Your son, and I'm not even saying that Jaylin is losing any sleep over this. Of course, we know it's a conversation piece for the show. But I mean, Kimmy, can you just come out and just say Maurice is wrong? If he was doing that and you felt that way, baby, I'm sorry that you felt that way, and Maurice is wrong. And I too, as a mom, should have said something to him knowing that he was doing those things, But of course, like I said, I don't know what this thing is with Kimmy. I think I said it in my first review. Kimmy got married when she was 46 years old, and there's nothing wrong with that because I'm 48 years old. But Kimmy, to me, has this thing like, I don't know if she feels like she never thought it would happen for her. So she is just like protective of her marriage and just anything goes because she's just so happy and elated to be married. I don't know. It gives me that because I don't understand why, Kimmy, you've been married to this man for several years and you still cannot tell him the truth, or you cannot tell him when he's wrong. I'm not saying that they don't have those conversations off camera, but to me, it seems as if Kimmy is always protecting Maurice and not even being honest about who Maurice is. I mean, we saw the worst of the worst of the worst of Maurice when Kimmy had her cancer bout, and Kimmy was basically saying she did not feel like herself. She did not feel like a woman. You know, she was sort of even faking orgasms, the old word. She was faking with him, and she gave it to him, or she was intimate with him because she knew he needed it, but it's not really how she felt, or it was not a desire for her at the time. And instead of Maurice even feeling bad for even pressuring Kimmy the way he did, he was more concerned about her saying that she didn't enjoy it or whatever. He let his ego get in the way with that, and he never said, well, if there is a time that you don't feel it and you feel like I'm pressuring you, let me know so that I can back off. He never, ever, 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 ever said that. So I don't have respect for Maurice, and I'm getting to the point I don't even have respect for Kimmy because I just feel like she makes way too many excuses for him. But that was the gist of their conversation. So we saw Chris have a conversation with Lance, and he went to Lance's office, and basically Chris just said, I don't even want to get too much into that because Chris was just saying basically, Lance mentioned to him about, how tough it was with him for the baby. He's not sleeping well. He's not getting enough rest, and it's affecting his work. He also mentioned that, Nell sort of volunteered. He didn't ask her. Nell volunteered to come and stay 2 to 3 times with Lance to help out with the baby. Chris doesn't want anything to do with the grandkids. Chris is not a typical, and I wrote in my notes, he's not a typical grandpa or a typical pop. He does not, even when Lance first came to stay with them when the baby was born, you could tell Chris was annoyed by it. He's saying, Nell and I have gotten to a place where, we've set boundaries. Well, it's not just about boundaries, Chris. You don't want a newborn. You don't want a crying baby in your house. You're well beyond that now. Chris is one of those men, he's not going to, Chris is not one of those grandfathers where he has the baby on his chest and he's falling asleep. He's not the type of grandfather where he's looking at this cute little adorable baby girl and he wants to just coddle her and make sure he's okay. Chris seemed I understand what he was saying as a father and as an adult. He's saying, yes, you have to learn how to weather the storm on your own and not always look or seek help. And this particular time, I don't really think Lance was doing it. Like I said, Nell sort of volunteered her services for that. I think Lance respected what Chris was saying. Chris said, maybe you need to talk to Martell or whatever. Well, yeah, he could do that, with Martell being being a father or having his children, but also when Martell and Melody's kids were young, they were still together. When all of his children were newborns, except for the last one, and I can't think of her name right now, but little cutie patootie. Anyway, their last child, Martell and Melody had separated by that time, but again, she had the 3 other children. Again, but when Martell, normally that newborn phase, Martell did not have that baby all on his own. And so I think that's what, Chris is not looking at. If Lance is raising this baby by himself, then yeah, Lance could be a little stressed out or a little overwhelmed. But Chris is just basically saying, hey, we have to set boundaries and we have to address those boundaries again. But to me, Chris was just saying, I don't want a newborn cramping my style. You know what I'm saying? If I want to walk around naked, if I don't, if I want my wife all to myself, if we want to go out to dinner, whatever, this is what I want it to be. I don't want us having to care for a crying baby. And that's the impression that he gave me. on the flip side of it, Nell is all for being a grandma. She wants to help Lance. Lance is her firstborn child. She wants to help him with the baby. She wants to take care of the grandbaby. She wants to look after her granddaughter. So there is probably going to be a little clash there. You can see that they have opposing views about that. So I don't know what the outcome of it will be, but there are definitely some opposing views there. But like I said, to me, Chris just came across as a man who is over the baby phase of his life. And I can probably say Chris probably never took care of any of his children. He probably is one of those men who probably never even watched his children alone for more than 6 hours. That's what he reminds me of. Chris is like, to me, I kind of like Chris, but I don't. Chris is like a pretty boy. Chris comes across very smooth and, like he has it together. He's owned up to his mistakes and stuff like that. But at the same time, I can see Chris kind of being a little chauvinistic at times. It may be undercover. It may not be as overt and out as, Marceau and Martell and the rest of them, but it's definitely lying beneath the surface. So Nell and Tisha, which was the last scene, Nell and Latisha met up at a coffee shop. Let me just say this, Nell's confessional look, she had on like a fuchsia, it wasn't a neon pink, but like a fuchsia dress, and she had her hair like really straight and sort of like this, like a wavy curl like this. Nell looked really nice. I think that was my all-time favorite look for Nell in her confessional. She looked really nice, really elegant, sophisticated. I like that look for Nell. So anyway, they were at the coffee house. Tisha came in. Tisha was very nice, wanting to have the conversation. Nell was out the gate, from the word go. Nell was basically like, look, I'm here. Nell did not even give Tisha really a chance to respond. Nell was very feisty and very forceful with what she was saying. And Nell asked her, she straight out approached her. She said, look, I don't like what you did to Chris. And, Tisha was basically saying, hey, she didn't mean it that way. She wasn't trying to get in his face. And actually, Tisha wasn't in his face. Nell kept saying that Tisha was in his face, but she wasn't. But Tisha kind of walked up to him. And like I said, Tisha was tipsy. I'm not saying that's an excuse to do someone that way, but that's what was going on. And Tisha was just basically telling her, like, you have it all wrong. It wasn't meant that way. And if you took it that way, then I'm sorry. But if we're going to sit here, you have to allow me to speak. And you also cannot come at me and talk to me like I'm a child. But of course, Nell kept going. She didn't stop. Tisha also brought up like, hey, you keep talking about the transparency and things with my husband, but there are some unanswered questions about your husband. There was a time, I think a couple of seasons ago, where the guys went to Atlanta. Chris and Nell explained that time. Nell said she went to have some plastic surgery done, and she had it done in Atlanta. Chris went to Atlanta with the guys. He hung out with the guys, but then he came back to the Airbnb where they stayed to make sure that she was okay. But there were some unanswered questions in Tisha's head, because Tisha said that Marceau told her when he was hanging out or when he was doing whatever he was doing in Atlanta that he was with Chris. So there is still some, like I said, there's Chris's side of the story, there's Marceau's side of the story, there's Nell's side of the story, and there's Tisha's side of the story. And somewhere in there is the truth. We may never know what the truth is, but what these ladies have to stop doing is trying to one up each other on whose husband is doing wrong, or whose husband did what, or whose husband was involved. The fact of the matter is that they were all there in Atlanta. Anything could happen, and they're holding each other's secrets. Martell is the only one that has sort of said, you guys have been talking about me, ganging up on me and letting me get beat up, and now I'm going to turn the tables on you. But for the most part, men hold one another's secrets, and they normally do a good job at that. So these girls are trying to expose each other while the men are sort of backing away, because they really don't want the truth to actually come out. So that was the end of the scene, because guess what, guys? Tisha had to end up leaving because Nell was like a pit bull. She was not letting it go. And Nell really was coming across very rude to Latisha. We've seen this in a number of scenes with some of these girls. We actually saw it. I know Mel and Mel and Destiny sort of had a clash like that before, but Nell in this particular scene was extremely rude. She really would not let Latisha talk. So Latisha said, you know what, since you're acting like that, I'm just gonna go. And she left, and that was the end of that. She left Nell sitting there, and that was the end of the episode, guys. I hope I gave you I didn't want the video to be too long, but I wanted to give you, you know, sort of a little detail about what was going on, because there was a lot of conversation. Every scene had like a lot of meat to it. So I just wanted to sort of like give you all of that, and I hope I did a good job at that. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. I would really appreciate that. And if you feel like, you know, hey, if you watch the episode and you feel like I missed something, please let me know in the comments, or, you know, if you have an opposing view, please let me know. I certainly don't mind, you know, as long as it's respectful. I love to, you know, sort of engage with some of you online, and I really, really appreciate that. But tell me what you thought of the episode. How do you feel? We're 5 episodes in. Are you enjoying the season thus far? You know, how do you feel about the whole Nell Tisha feud? You know, is it petty, or is it something that they need to just sort of move past, or do you really feel like these ladies are holding back? How do you feel about, you know, Maurice and Jaylin? Do you think that they will actually, you know, do you think Maurice will get better? Do you think that by the end of the season Jaylin will say that nothing's changed? You know, how do you feel? What do you think about the whole Lance and Destiny thing? Do you think that Lance should finally have a conversation with Destiny about him having a baby while they were, let's just say, while they were friends? So let me know what you guys think. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'm going to do the same. I'm going to enjoy the rest of my day, and I hope that you guys be safe out there. There's so much going on in the world right now. Please be safe. And yeah, I'll see you soon. Until next time, have a great one. Bye.